The moment Landon Hayes saw the headlights punch through the guardrail and disappear over the cliff, he had exactly 3 seconds to choose between the daughter sleeping in his back seat and a stranger plunging toward the rocks below. That choice would save one woman's life, destroy another man's empire, and prove that the most dangerous thing a person can do is pull someone powerful out of the darkness, because they might drag you right back down into it. If you want to know whether love can survive when billion-dollar enemies come hunting, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain hit Blackwater Bay like punishment. Landon Hayes gripped the steering wheel of his decade-old pickup truck, squinting through the downpour as the wipers struggled to keep pace. The coast highway twisted along the cliffs above the Pacific, and on nights like this, black sky, no moon, wind screaming off the ocean, it felt less like a road and more like a dare. "Daddy, I'm cold." By and ma. He glanced in the rear-view mirror. Chloe sat buckled in the back, her blonde hair still damp from dance practice. Her dinosaur backpack clutched against her chest like a shield. 8 years old and already too smart for her own good. "Heat's busted again, kiddo," Landon said. "I'll fix it this weekend." "You said that last weekend." "Yeah, well, last weekend the sink decided to explode." Chloe wrinkled her nose. "Our house is falling apart." It's not falling apart. It's just experienced." She giggled, and the sound filled something hollow in his chest. 3 years since Sarah died, and he still wasn't used to being the only one responsible for that laugh. The only one standing between Chloe and a world that didn't give a damn about little girls with dead mothers. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the windows. "I don't like this storm," Chloe whispered. "Me neither, baby. But we're almost home." That was a lie. They still had 15 minutes of winding cliffside highway ahead, and the storm was getting worse. Landon eased off the gas, his construction-roughened hands steady on the wheel. 12-hour days framing houses didn't leave much energy for white-knuckle drives, but complaining wouldn't pay the medical bills still piled on the kitchen counter. The radio crackled with static. He turned it off. That's when he saw the headlights. They came screaming around the curve behind him, high and bright, moving way too fast for the conditions. Landon's stomach tightened. He edged closer to the shoulder, giving the idiot room to pass. But the vehicle didn't pass. It came up hard on his bumper, close enough that the glare flooded his cab. Landon's jaw clenched. Some rich tourist in a hurry, probably, thinking the coast highway was their personal racetrack. "Daddy, that car's too close." "I know, sweetheart, just ignore them." Look. The vehicle, an SUV, sleek and expensive, swerved into the oncoming lane and pulled alongside him. Landon caught a glimpse of tinted windows, chrome accents, the kind of machine that cost more than he'd make in 5 years. Then it jerked hard to the right. Landon's instincts kicked in before his brain caught up. He yanked the wheel left, tires skidding on the wet pavement, the truck fishtailing toward the cliff edge. Chloe screamed. His heart slammed into his throat as he fought for control, the guardrail rushing up too fast, too close. The truck stopped 6 inches from the edge. Landon sat frozen, breath coming in ragged gasps, his hands locked on the wheel. Behind him, Chloe was crying. "It's okay," he said, his voice shaking. "It's okay, baby. We're okay." But they weren't okay, because the SUV that had just run them off the road was still moving. Landon watched, numb with shock, as the luxury vehicle swerved wildly across both lanes. The driver overcorrected, tires shrieking, and then the SUV hit the guardrail at 60 miles an hour. Metal screamed. Sparks exploded into the rain. The guardrail snapped like a broken bone, and the SUV launched into empty air. For one impossible second, it seemed to hang there, suspended against the black sky. Then gravity remembered its job. The SUV plunged over the cliff and disappeared into the darkness below. "Paches!" Landon was out of the truck before he realized he'd moved. "Daddy, no!" Chloe's voice barely registered. He was already running toward the shattered guardrail, rain hammering his face, his boots slipping on the wet asphalt. He reached the edge and looked down. The cliff dropped 80 feet to a nightmare of jagged rocks and churning surf. The SUV had landed on a narrow shelf about 30 feet down, wedged between two massive boulders. Waves crashed over it, white foam hissing in the darkness. The driver's side door hung open, bent at an unnatural angle. Landon's construction-trained eyes did the math in seconds. The shelf was unstable. The next big wave could wash the whole thing into the ocean. And someone was still inside. He turned and ran back to the truck. Chloe had climbed into the front seat, her face pale and terrified. "Daddy, what are you doing?" "Stay in the truck," Landon said, yanking open the toolbox in the bed. His hands found the rope he used for securing lumber, 60 feet of braided nylon that suddenly felt like the only thing standing between life and death. "You can't go down there." "Someone's in that car, baby. You'll die." The words hit him like a fist. He looked at his daughter, his whole world, the only person he had left, and saw Sarah's eyes staring back at him, terrified, pleading. "I'll be careful," he said. "You promise?" Landon hesitated. He'd learned the hard way that promises meant nothing against cancer, that good intentions couldn't stop the universe from ripping people away. But Chloe needed something to hold on to. "I promise," he lied. He tied one end of the rope to the truck's trailer hitch and tested the knot twice. Then he grabbed his flashlight, looped the rope around his waist, and walked back to the edge of the cliff. The wind tried to shove him backward. The rain blinded him. And somewhere in the rational part of his brain, a voice screamed that this was insane, that he had a daughter who needed him, that risking his life for a stranger was the definition of stupid. Landon ignored the voice and started climbing down. Batan. The rocks were slick with rain and sea spray, each handhold a gamble. Landon moved carefully, testing every grip before trusting his weight to it. The rope around his waist provided some security, but not much. If he fell wrong, it would just give Chloe a body to bury instead of a father to hug. Halfway down, his boot slipped on a patch of moss. He dropped 3 feet before catching himself, his shoulder slamming into stone hard enough to steal his breath. Pain radiated down his arm, but he kept moving. The flashlight beam found the SUV. Up close, the damage was worse than he'd thought. The front end was crumpled like aluminum foil, the windshield a spider web of cracks. Smoke poured from under the hood, mixing with the rain. Landon reached the narrow shelf and immediately understood how precarious the situation was. The rocks beneath his feet shifted with every wave. The SUV was balanced on the edge of a steeper drop, and he could hear metal groaning as the vehicle settled. He had minutes, maybe less. The driver's door hung open, and Landon shined his light inside. A woman was slumped against the steering wheel, unconscious. She was maybe 30, with dark hair plastered to her face and blood running from a cut above her eyebrow. She wore expensive clothes, a tailored jacket, silk blouse, that were now soaked and torn. Landon grabbed her shoulder. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. He checked her pulse, steady but weak. Alive, but not for long if he didn't get her out. The smell hit him then, gasoline, sharp and unmistakable. "No, no, no," Landon muttered. He looked under the SUV and saw fuel dripping onto the rocks, mixing with seawater. The crash must have ruptured the tank. And the smoke from the engine meant heat, which meant a small flame flickered under the hood. Landon's training took over. He unclipped the woman's seatbelt and hauled her out of the driver's seat, her dead weight nearly pulling him off balance. She was taller than Sarah had been, heavier, and getting her onto his shoulder while standing on wet rocks in a storm was like trying to juggle chainsaws. He managed it anyway. The climb back up was a special kind of hell. Every step felt like his legs would give out. The rope dug into his ribs. The woman's weight threw off his balance, and twice he nearly lost his grip. Rain poured into his eyes. Wind shoved at him like an invisible hand trying to finish what the crash had started. But he kept climbing. He was 10 feet from the top when he heard Chloe screaming. "Daddy, hurry! Yes, boss, shite boy." Bay. Landon risked a glance down. The flames under the SUV's hood had spread, licking at the tires. Smoke billowed black and thick. He climbed faster. 5 feet from the top, his boot found solid ground. Then his hand. Then he was over the edge, collapsing onto the asphalt with the unconscious woman still draped across his shoulder. Chloe ran to him, sobbing, "Daddy, you're okay. You're—" The explosion cut her off. The fireball erupted from the cliff below, a roaring blast of heat and light that turned the rain into steam. Landon threw himself over Chloe, shielding her from the shockwave. Debris rained down, twisted metal, shattered glass, pieces of rock blown loose by the force. Then silence. Landon lifted his head. The SUV was gone. consumed by fire and ocean. Only the flames remained, reflecting off the wet highway like a second sunset. He looked at the woman lying unconscious beside him. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. "EAs." The Blackwater Bay Medical Center was the kind of hospital where the waiting room coffee tasted like regret, and the fluorescent lights made everyone look half dead. Landon sat in a plastic chair, elbows on his knees, dried blood on his hands. Chloe had fallen asleep against his side, her dinosaur backpack serving as a pillow. The adrenaline had worn off an hour ago, leaving him exhausted and sore, his shoulder throbbing where he'd hit the rocks. A nurse had checked them both out, minor cuts, bruises, nothing requiring stitches. The woman from the SUV had been rushed into emergency care the moment the ambulance arrived. That had been 3 hours ago. Nobody had told Landon anything since. He didn't know why he was still here. Chloe needed sleep, and he had work in 6 hours. But something kept him in that uncomfortable chair, waiting for news about a stranger he'd pulled from the fire. Maybe it was because Sarah had died in a hospital like this one, surrounded by beeping machines and fluorescent lights, and doctors who couldn't do a damn thing to stop the cancer. Maybe it was because he needed to know that just once, diving into the darkness to save someone had actually worked. "Mr. Hayes?" Landon looked up. A doctor stood in front of him, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. "That's me," Landon said quietly, not wanting to wake Chloe. "The patient you brought in is stable," the doctor said. "Concussion, broken ribs, some internal bruising. She's lucky you got her out when you did. Another minute and—" "But—" She let the sentence hang. "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated. "She's sedated right now, but there's someone here who wants to speak with you." Before Landon could ask who, a man in an expensive suit stepped into the waiting area. He was maybe 40, with silver at his temples and the kind of presence that made hospital staff move out of his way without being asked. "Mr. Hayes," the man said, extending a hand. "My name is Marcus Webb. I work for the woman you saved tonight." Landon shook the offered hand, confused. "Work for her?" "Miss Laurent is my employer, Celeste Laurent." The name meant nothing to Landon. He shook his head. Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "You don't know who she is? Should I?" "Most people would." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Landon a photo. A professional headshot of the woman from the SUV, cleaned up and styled, looking like she belonged on a magazine cover. "Celeste Laurent, CEO of Laurent Tech. She's worth approximately $4 billion. Landon stared at the photo, then at Marcus, then back at the photo. "I pulled a billionaire out of a burning car," he said slowly. "You did? And you're her. What, assistant? Head of security?" Marcus pocketed his phone. "Mr. Hayes, I need to ask you some questions about tonight. What you saw before the crash, during, after. It's important." Landon frowned. "The police already asked me everything." "I'm not the police." Something in Marcus's tone made the hairs on Landon's neck stand up. He glanced down at Chloe, still sleeping against his side, then back at the security chief. "What aren't you telling me?" Landon asked. Marcus looked around the waiting room, checking for listeners, Landon realized, then leaned in closer. "Miss Laurent's accident wasn't an accident," Marcus said quietly. "Someone tried to kill her tonight, and now that you've saved her life, they're going to know your name." Dortoir. They moved to a private consultation room, just Landon and Marcus. With Chloe still asleep in the waiting area under the watch of a nurse Marcus had apparently bribed with a $100 bill, Landon sat across from the security chief, his exhaustion replaced by a cold knot of fear in his gut. "Start from the beginning," he said. Marcus did. For the past 6 months, Celeste Laurent had been experiencing what her security team initially dismissed as bad luck. Files disappeared from her office. Meetings were sabotaged by leaked information. Anonymous emails threatened her with vague warnings about consequences if she didn't step back. Then the threats escalated. 2 months ago, someone hacked her personal accounts and drained $3 million before the breach was detected. 1 month ago, her car was tampered with, brake lines cut, but her driver noticed before she got in. 3 weeks ago, someone sent photos of her apartment to her phone with a message. "We know where you sleep." "Why didn't she go to the police?" Landon asked. "She did. They found nothing. No fingerprints, No digital trail, no witnesses. Whoever's doing this is a professional. And tonight, Marcus's jaw tightened. Tonight, someone ran her off the road in the middle of a storm. If she'd gone over the cliff anywhere else, the fall would have killed her instantly. But she got lucky, landed on that shelf instead of the rocks below. Then you got luckier. You think this is about her company? I think it's about $4 billion, and whoever wants to take it from her. Marcus leaned forward. Here's what you need to understand, Mr. Hayes. You're a witness now. You saw what happened on that highway. And depending on who's behind this, that makes you a problem. The knot in Landon's gut tightened. I didn't see anything, just headlights and a crash. Doesn't matter. They don't know what you saw. All they know is you pulled her out alive. Landon stood up, pacing the small room. His shoulder ached, his hands hurt, and all he wanted was to take his daughter home and pretend this night had never happened. So what are you saying? He asked. That I'm in danger? I'm saying you should be careful. Watch your back. Pay attention to who's around you. That's not an answer. Marcus met his eyes. The honest answer? I don't know yet. But Miss Laurent would want me to protect the man who saved her life. So I'm offering you security, discreet, professional, someone to keep an eye on you and your daughter until we know more. I don't want security. I want my normal life back. I understand. But normal ended the moment you climbed down that cliff. Landon wanted to argue, to tell this suit-wearing stranger to take his paranoia and his billions and leave him alone. But then he thought about Chloe, asleep in the waiting room, trusting him to keep her safe. He thought about the SUV swerving into him on the highway, forcing him toward the edge. He thought about Marcus's words. Someone tried to kill her tonight. How long? Landon asked quietly. How long what? How long until you know if I'm in danger? Marcus considered. A week, maybe 2, until we identify who's behind the attacks. And if you can't, then we'll deal with that when it happens. Landon looked at the ceiling, feeling the weight of choices he never asked for pressing down on him. He was a construction worker, a single dad, a guy who fixed broken sinks and drove a truck held together with duct tape and prayer. He wasn't supposed to be part of this world. But Marcus was right about one thing. Normal had ended the moment he made the choice to save a stranger's life. Fine, Landon said finally. 1 week, but I don't want anyone scaring my daughter. Whoever you send, they stay invisible. Marcus nodded. You have my word. They shook hands again, and Landon felt like he'd just signed a contract written in disappearing ink. Landon carried Chloe to the truck and buckled her into the back seat. She stirred briefly, mumbling something about dinosaurs, then fell back asleep. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at the hospital entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see people moving, doctors, nurses, patients. Normal people living normal lives, untouched by burning cars and billionaire conspiracies. He started the engine. The heat still didn't work. The drive home took 20 minutes. The storm had passed, leaving the coast highway wet and quiet under a sky full of stars. Landon kept checking the rearview mirror, looking for headlights that followed too close, vehicles that moved too deliberately. Nothing. Maybe Marcus was wrong. Maybe this whole thing would blow over and life would go back to the comfortable struggle of bills and broken appliances and getting Chloe to school on time. Maybe. He pulled into the driveway of their small house, a 2-bedroom rental on the edge of Blackwater Bay, with a view of the lake and a yard full of weeds he kept meaning to pull. The porch light was out again. He added it to the mental list of things to fix. Landon carried Chloe inside and tucked her into bed, boots and all. She'd complain in the morning, but tonight he didn't have the energy to fight her about pajamas. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Love you, kiddo." Butts. She didn't wake up. Landon walked to the kitchen and stood at the sink staring at his reflection in the dark window. He looked old, tired, like a man who'd used up his luck years ago and was still somehow standing. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Landon almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept. "Mr. Hayes?" A woman's voice, weak but steady. "Yeah?" "This is Celeste Laurent. I'm told you're the reason I'm still alive." Landon closed his eyes. You should be resting. I will. But first I needed to say thank you. What you did tonight. Most people would have driven past. Most people aren't stupid enough to climb down a cliff in a storm. She laughed, soft and pained. Maybe. Or maybe you're just a better person than most. Landon didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't a better person. He was just a guy who couldn't walk away from someone dying, even when he should have. Your security guy, Marcus, he thinks someone tried to kill you, Landon said. Silence on the other end. Then, he's right. So what are you going to do? Survive, Celeste said simply. Same thing I've been doing for 6 months. And what am I supposed to do? Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Live your life, Mr. Hayes. Take care of your daughter. Don't let my problems become yours. Too late for that. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just figure out who's trying to kill you so I can stop looking over my shoulder. I will. I promise. Landon wanted to believe her. But he'd learned a long time ago that promises were just words people said to make themselves feel better. Get some rest, he said. You too. She hung up. Landon stood in the dark kitchen, phone in hand, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. Cheeks. The nightmares started that night. Landon dreamed of Sarah in the hospital bed, pale and skeletal, her hand cold in his. But when he looked closer, it wasn't Sarah anymore. It was Celeste Laurent, covered in blood, reaching for him as flames consumed the room. He woke up at 4 a.m., drenched in sweat, his heart hammering. Chloe was still asleep down the hall. The house was quiet. Landon got up and made coffee, then sat at the kitchen table with his laptop. He typed Celeste Laurent into the search bar and started reading. The articles painted a picture of someone who existed in a different universe. CEO at 25, billionaire at 28. A tech empire built on artificial intelligence and data analytics, with offices in 12 countries and contracts with half the Fortune 500. But the personal details were sparse. No husband, no kids. Parents deceased. She lived alone in a San Francisco penthouse, rarely gave interviews, and was described by business rivals as brilliant but ruthless. One article from 6 months ago caught his attention. Laurent Tech under fire. Former employees claim toxic work culture. Landon clicked through and skimmed the piece. Multiple people had accused Celeste of pushing employees too hard, demanding impossible deadlines, firing anyone who questioned her decisions. One former executive called her a genius with the empathy of a shark. He closed the laptop, unsettled. The woman he'd pulled from the burning SUV hadn't seemed like a shark. She'd seemed scared, vulnerable, human. But people wore masks. Landon knew that better than anyone. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Good morning, Mr. Hayes. This is Marcus Webb. Your security detail starts today. You won't see them, but they'll be close. Stay safe. Landon stared at the message, then looked out the kitchen window at the quiet street. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky pink and gold over the lake. Somewhere out there, someone wanted Celeste Laurent dead. And now, whether he liked it or not, Landon Hayes was part of her story. He finished his coffee and went to wake Chloe for school. Normal was over. Time to figure out how to survive what came next. The black sedan appeared 3 days later. Landon noticed it on Thursday morning while walking Chloe to the school bus stop. The car sat parked across the street, windows tinted, engine running. It hadn't been there the day before. That's Marcus's people, he muttered, keeping his voice low. Chloe looked up at him, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. What people? Nobody. Just talking to myself. She wrinkled her nose. You're being weird, Daddy. Yeah, well, I'm good at that. The bus arrived with a hydraulic hiss, and Chloe climbed aboard. She waved from the window, gap-toothed smile, messy ponytail, and Landon waved back until the bus disappeared around the corner. Then he turned and stared at the black sedan. The driver's window lowered halfway. A woman sat behind the wheel, maybe 35, with short dark hair and the kind of stillness that came from military training. She nodded once at Landon. He nodded back. The window rose, and the sedan pulled away. Landon walked back to the house, his boots crunching on gravel. The morning was cold and clear. the kind of California coastal weather that tourists paid money to experience. But all he could think about was the weight of invisible eyes watching him, counting his steps, cataloging his routine. Marcus had promised invisible security. Instead, Landon felt like an animal in a zoo. His phone rang as he reached the front door. Unknown number again. Hayes, he answered. Mr. Hayes, this is Dr. Patel from Blackwater Bay Medical. A woman's voice, professional but strained. I'm calling about Celeste Laurent. She's asking to see you. Landon stopped with his hand on the doorknob. Why? She didn't say, but she's been difficult since she woke up. The sedation wore off yesterday, and she's refusing pain medication, trying to discharge herself against medical advice. When I mentioned your name, she finally agreed to stay, on the condition that you visit. I'm not family. I'm nobody. You saved her life, Mr. Hayes. That makes you somebody. Landon closed his eyes, already knowing he'd say yes, even though every instinct told him to stay away. When? He asked. Today, if possible. She's in room 307, third floor, east wing. Fine, I'll be there this afternoon. He hung up and stood on his porch, staring at the lake. The water was smooth as glass, reflecting clouds like a mirror. Peaceful. Ordinary. Everything his life wasn't anymore. Inside, the sink still leaked, the bills still waited, and somewhere in a hospital room, a billionaire he'd never met before last week was asking for him like he mattered. Landon went inside, grabbed his truck keys, and tried not to think too hard about what came next. Room 307 smelled like antiseptic and flowers. Someone had sent enough bouquets to fill a funeral home. Roses, lilies, orchids arranged in crystal vases that probably cost more than Landon's monthly rent. Get well cards covered every flat surface, most of them signed by people with titles like board member and chief operating officer. Celeste Laurent sat propped up in the hospital bed, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face pale but alert. Someone had brought her real clothes, a gray sweater and black pants instead of the hospital gown. The bandage over her eyebrow was the only visible sign of the crash. She looked up when Landon entered, and something shifted in her expression. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion finally catching up. Mr. Hayes, she said, you came. The doctor said you were being difficult. I prefer assertive. She gestured to the chair beside the bed. Please sit. Landon sat, feeling out of place in his work boots and faded jeans. This close, he could see the bruises on her arms, the faint tremble in her hands that she tried to hide. How are you feeling? He asked. Like I got hit by a truck. Or drove one off a cliff, anyway. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The doctors keep telling me how lucky I am. Apparently, broken ribs and a concussion qualify as lucky now. Compared to dead? Yeah, I'd say so. Fair point. Celeste looked at him for a long moment, her gaze uncomfortably direct. Marcus told me what you did, climbing down in the storm, pulling me out before the explosion. That was incredibly stupid. You're welcome, Shab. I'm serious. You could have died. You have a daughter who needs you. And you have 4 billion people who apparently need you to stay alive and keep their stock prices up. Celeste laughed, then winced, pressing a hand to her ribs. Ow, don't make me laugh. Then don't say stupid things. Touché. She shifted in the bed, trying to get comfortable. Marcus also told me he's assigned you security. I want you to know that wasn't my decision. If it makes you uncomfortable, it does. But then I'll call it off. Landon shook his head. No, keep them. I don't like it, but I'm not an idiot. If someone's trying to kill you, and I'm connected to you now. He trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. Celeste's expression hardened. They won't touch you or your daughter. I promise you that. You can't promise that. You don't even know who they are. Not yet, but I will. The certainty in her voice was either impressive or delusional. Landon couldn't tell which. So what's the plan? He asked. You hide in this hospital forever? No, I'm leaving tomorrow. The doctor said, I don't care what the doctor said. Staying here makes me a sitting target. I need to move, regroup, figure out who's behind this before they try again. And go where? Celeste hesitated, and for the first time since he'd entered the room, she looked uncertain. That's complicated. How complicated, right? My apartment in San Francisco is compromised. My office building has been cleared by security, but I can't live there. My properties in New York and London are too far from my company headquarters. Hotels are out of the question. Too many access points. Too many strangers. She took a breath. Marcus suggested a safe house, but everywhere I go, people know. My face is on magazine covers. Someone always recognizes me. Landon saw where this was going and didn't like it. Don't, he said. Don't what? Whatever you're about to ask, the answer's no. Celeste met his eyes. I wasn't going to ask you anything. Good. But hypothetically, if I needed somewhere to disappear for a week or two while my security team tracked down the threat, would you know anyone who might help? No. Someone who lives quietly, off the radar, in a place nobody would think to look? Mansan. I said no, and someone who might appreciate having extra security around to protect their daughter while dangerous people are asking questions? Landon stood up. This conversation's over. Mister. Hayes, you want to hide? Fine. Rent a cabin in the woods. Buy an island. You've got $4 billion. Figure it out. But leave me and Chloe out of it. He turned to leave. They followed your daughter home from school yesterday. Landon froze, his hand on the door handle. Marcus didn't want to tell you, Celeste continued quietly. He thought it might have been a coincidence. But today they were there again. A gray van, parked half a block from the bus stop. 2 men inside, watching. Landon turned around slowly. You're lying. I wish I was. If someone's threatening my daughter, why the hell am I just hearing about this now? Because Marcus wanted to be sure before he scared you. But I told him I don't care about sure. You have a right to know. Landon's vision narrowed. The hospital room, the flowers, Celeste's bruised face, all of it faded behind a rising wave of cold fury. Who? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We don't know yet, but they're watching you because of me, because you saved my life, and now they see you as a witness, a liability. What? My bashachwants. So fix it. Make them stop. I can't. Not until I know who they are. Celeste leaned forward, ignoring the pain it caused. But if you let me stay with you, just temporarily, then Marcus can consolidate security. Protect all of us in one place instead of spreading resources thin. My team is the best in the world, Mr. Hayes. With them around your house, nobody will get near Chloe. Landon wanted to punch something, preferably the people in the gray van. How long? He asked. A week. 2 at most. And then I go back to my life, and you go back to yours. You'll never hear from me again. It was a fantasy, and they both knew it, but what choice did he have? Walk away and hope the people threatening a billionaire decided a construction worker wasn't worth the effort? He thought about Chloe at the bus stop, smiling and waving, completely unaware that strangers were watching her. Fine, Landon said, but we have rules. Mom. The rules were simple. Celeste would pose as a security consultant hired to assess threats against Landon following the accident. Anyone who asked would be told she was staying in the guest room temporarily while coordinating protection details. She would not draw attention. No expensive cars, no designer clothes, no billionaire behavior that screamed, "Look at me." She would help with household expenses, but nothing excessive. No sudden renovations or luxury purchases that would make neighbors suspicious. And most importantly, she would not disrupt Chloe's routine. School, dance class, homework, bedtime, all of it stayed exactly the same. I can do that, Celeste said when Landon finished laying down the law. You sure? Because living in my house isn't like living in a penthouse. The heat doesn't work half the time. The hot water runs out after one shower. And if you want food, you cook it yourself. I can cook. Landon raised an eyebrow. Really? I can learn to cook. Great. That's reassuring. Marcus handled the logistics. He arrived at Landon's house the next evening with 3 SUVs, a security team that looked like they'd been hired from a Secret Service catalog, and enough surveillance equipment to monitor a small country. Landon stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching them transform his quiet lakeside rental into a fortress. "This is invisible?" he asked when Marcus approached. "Invisible to civilians," Marcus said. "Very visible to anyone stupid enough to try something." Maz. "My neighbors are going to ask questions. Tell them you're part of a witness protection detail. It's close enough to the truth." Landon looked at the man setting up cameras on the roof. "And when Chloe asks why there are strangers with guns living in our yard, tell her they're making sure the bad people stay away. She's 8. She's going to have nightmares." Marcus's expression softened slightly. Kids are tougher than we give them credit for, and nightmares are better than the alternative. Landon couldn't argue with that. Celeste arrived an hour later in an unmarked car, wearing jeans and a plain jacket that probably still cost $1,000, but at least didn't scream wealth. She carried a single overnight bag, evidence that someone on her team understood the meaning of low profile. Chloe was watching cartoons in the living room when Celeste entered. She looked up, curious but not scared. "Hi," Chloe said. "Hi," Celeste replied. Celeste, suddenly looking more nervous than she had in the hospital. "You must be Chloe." "Yep, who are you?" Landon stepped in. "This is Miss Laurent. She's going to be staying with us for a little while." "Why?" "Because she needs somewhere safe to stay, and we're helping her out." "Oh." Chloe studied Celeste with the brutal honesty of a child. "Are you the lady from the car accident?" Celeste blinked, surprised. "How did you know that? Daddy talks in his sleep. He kept saying, 'Hold on and don't let go.' Were you scared?" "Very scared," Celeste admitted. "Me too. I thought Daddy was going to die." The room went quiet. Landon felt his throat tighten. "But he didn't," Celeste said gently. "He was very brave." "He's always brave, even when he's scared." Chloe tilted her head. "Do you like dinosaurs?" "I don't know much about them." "That's okay. I can teach you. I know everything about velociraptors." And just like that, the tension broke. Chloe grabbed Celeste's hand and dragged her toward the couch to explain why velociraptors were the best dinosaurs, and anyone who said otherwise was wrong. Landon watched them, this strange collision of worlds, a billionaire CEO and an 8-year-old girl bonding over prehistoric reptiles, and wondered what the hell his life had become. Marcus appeared beside him. "She's good with kids." Surprised? "A little. Most people in her position never have to be." "Most people in her position don't end up hiding in a construction worker's house." "True." Marcus glanced at his watch. "Perimeter secure, motion sensors active. My team will rotate shifts every 6 hours. You won't see them unless something goes wrong. And if something goes wrong, then you get Chloe and Miss Laurent into the safe room we're installing in your basement, and you let us handle it." "You're installing a safe room in my rental house?" "Landlord approved it. We're paying for the modifications." Landon rubbed his face. "This is insane." "Welcome to Miss Laurent's world." Marcus headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Hayes, you did a good thing saving her. She's not perfect, but she doesn't deserve what's happening to her. Nobody does." He left before Landon could respond. The first night was awkward. Celeste sat at the kitchen table while Landon made spaghetti, the only meal he could cook without burning something. She watched him work with the kind of fascination usually reserved for alien life forms. "You cook every night?" she asked. "Someone has to. Chloe won't eat takeout more than twice a week." "Why not hire help?" Landon laughed. "With what money?" "I just meant to—" "I know what you meant, and the answer is I can't afford help. I can barely afford rent." He drained the pasta, steam rising in his face. "But we manage." Celeste went quiet. Landon glanced over and saw her staring at her hands like they held answers to questions she hadn't figured out how to ask yet. "You okay?" he said. "I'm realizing how little I know about normal life." "This isn't normal. Normal doesn't include billionaires hiding from assassins." You know what I mean. Cooking dinner, doing dishes, tucking kids into bed. I've built a $4 billion company, but I can't do any of the things that actually matter." Landon brought 2 plates to the table, spaghetti with jarred sauce and frozen garlic bread. Gourmet it wasn't. Matters according to who? He asked, sitting down. According to anyone living in the real world. The real world's overrated. Trust me, Beck. Celeste picked up her fork, studying the food like it might bite back. When was the last time someone cooked for you? The question hit harder than Landon expected. He took a breath before answering. 3 years ago, my wife Sarah, she made chicken parmesan the night before she went into hospice. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... It's fine. It was a long time ago. 3 years isn't that long. Long enough. Yeah. They ate in silence for a minute. The spaghetti was mediocre at best, but Celeste cleaned her plate like it was the best meal she'd ever had. This is really good, she said. You're a terrible liar. I'm serious. It tastes like effort, like someone cared enough to make it. She paused. Most of my meals come from restaurants where the chef doesn't know my name and wouldn't care if I choked. Sounds lonely. It is. Chloe bounded into the kitchen, already in her pajamas. Daddy, can Miss Laurent read me a story? Celeste looked panicked. I don't know if... Please? Chloe deployed the weapon-grade puppy eyes that Landon had never successfully resisted. Celeste glanced at Landon, silently begging for rescue. He grinned. Good luck. 20 minutes later, Landon stood outside Chloe's bedroom door, listening to Celeste attempt to read The Very Hungry Caterpillar with the stiff delivery of someone reading a legal contract. No, you have to do the voices, Chloe insisted. What voices? The caterpillar voice. Make it sound hungry. Celeste tried again, adding an awkward growl that made Chloe giggle. Better, Chloe declared. Now do the butterfly part. Landon smiled despite himself and walked back to the kitchen to finish the dishes. Day 3 brought rain and trouble. Landon was at a construction site when Marcus called, his voice tight with controlled urgency. We have a situation. Landon stepped away from the framing crew. What kind of situation? Someone tried to access Miss Laurent's corporate accounts from a location in Blackwater Bay. The IT team traced the login attempt to a coffee shop 2 blocks from your house. That could be a coincidence. It's not. The same IP address has been pinging her security feeds, trying to find her location. Whoever's after her knows she's in town. Landon's blood went cold. Is Chloe safe? She's at school. I've got 2 agents watching the building. But Hayes, you need to understand, this is escalating. They're getting desperate. So what do we do? Tighten the perimeter. Limit movement. And I need you to convince Miss Laurent to stop fighting me on protocol. What's she doing? Trying to work. She's on conference calls, sending emails, acting like everything's normal. Every digital footprint she leaves is another clue to her location. Landon hung up and drove home, breaking at least 3 traffic laws on the way. He found Celeste at the kitchen table with her laptop, surrounded by papers, completely absorbed in work. She barely looked up when he entered. You need to stop, Landon said. Stop what? Working. Marcus said you're leaving a trail. I'm running a company. I can't just disappear for weeks. You can and you will, unless you want whoever's trying to kill you to show up at my door. Celeste's jaw tightened. I have 4,000 employees depending on me. Board meetings, investor calls, product launches. None of that matters if you're dead. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. Landon slammed his hand on the table, making her jump. I let you into my home because you said my daughter was in danger. You promised this would keep us safe. But if you're going to keep playing CEO while hiding under my roof, then get out. I'm not risking Chloe for your stock price. Celeste stared at him, something breaking in her expression. Celeste stared at Tom. You're right, she said quietly. I'm sorry. She closed the laptop. The apology surprised him more than anything else that week. I'm not used to this, Celeste continued, her voice shaking slightly. Being powerless. Not knowing who to trust. I've spent 10 years building walls around myself, and someone just crashed through all of them. Working is the only thing that makes me feel like I still have control. Landon pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Control's an illusion, he said. I learned that watching my wife die. You can plan everything, do everything right, and life still takes what it wants. The only real power you have is how you handle losing it. That's a depressing philosophy. Yeah, well, depressing doesn't make it wrong. Celeste looked at him for a long moment, really seeing him for the first time. How do you do it? Keep going after losing someone you loved? Bom péssimo. Chloe, if I fall apart, she falls apart. So I get up every morning, make breakfast, drive her to school, pretend I have my shit together. Eventually, the pretending becomes real. Does it? Most days. Some days are harder. And today? Landon shrugged. Today I'm harboring a fugitive billionaire and explaining to my daughter why men with guns are living in our yard. So, pretty standard Thursday. Celeste smiled despite herself, and it transformed her face. Not the polished magazine cover smile, but something genuine and a little broken. Thank you, she said. For what? For being honest. Most people tell me what I want to hear. I'm not most people. I'm starting to realize that. Bartek. That night, they sat on the porch after Chloe went to bed, watching security lights sweep across the yard. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and sharp under a sky full of stars. Can I ask you something? Celeste said. Depends on the question. What did Sarah die from? Landon took a breath. He didn't talk about this often, but somehow, in the darkness with this stranger who'd crashed into his life, it felt easier. Ovarian cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. She fought for 18 months, but he trailed off. She made me promise to take care of Chloe, to make sure she grew up happy. I'm doing my best. You're doing more than that. Chloe's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. She's the reason I didn't fall apart completely. Celeste pulled her knees to her chest, looking younger than 30. I don't have anyone like that. No family, no real friends, just employees and board members who'd replace me in a heartbeat if I showed weakness. That sounds horrible. It is. She paused. But it's also safe. Can't lose people if you never let them close. Can't live either. Maybe living's overrated. Landon turned to look at her. You don't actually believe that. How would you know? Well, because if you did, you wouldn't be fighting so hard to stay alive. Celeste didn't answer, but something in her eyes shifted. They sat in silence, listening to the lake lap against the shore and the distant hum of Marcus's team checking perimeters. Two people from different worlds, thrown together by violence and chance, trying to figure out what came next. Landon? Celeste said quietly. Yeah? I'm scared. It was the first time she'd admitted it out loud, and the weight of those words hung in the cold night air. Me too, Landon said, and somehow admitting it together made it feel a little less terrifying. And sick. The breakthrough came on day 5. Marcus burst into the house at 6 a.m., his usual calm replaced by something sharp and urgent. Landon was making coffee while Celeste attempted to cook eggs, badly, and Chloe ate cereal at the table. We've got him, Marcus said. Celeste dropped the spatula. Who? Damien Voss, your former partner. The IT team traced the financial irregularities back to offshore accounts he controls. He's been embezzling for 8 months. The name hit Celeste like a physical blow. She grabbed the counter for support. That's impossible, she whispered. It's not. We have proof. Bank transfers, forged authorizations, deleted emails he thought were gone. He's been systematically draining the company and covering his tracks. But why try to kill me if he just wanted money? But why try to kill me because you were getting close to finding out. That audit you ordered last month, it would have exposed everything. He needed you gone before the truth came out. Landon watched Celeste's face cycle through shock, betrayal, and finally rage. Where is he? She asked, her voice dangerous. San Francisco? Still acting like nothing's wrong, still showing up to work. Then we go to the police. Arrest him. End this. What's a boy? Marcus shook his head. Not yet. We need airtight evidence that links him to the attempts on your life, not just embezzlement. Right now, we can prove fraud. We can't prove attempted murder. And Voss is smart. He'll have contingencies, people who will take the fall for him. So what do? We make him expose himself, force his hand. Celeste's eyes narrowed. How? Marcus smiled, and it wasn't friendly. By announcing you're alive, and coming back to the office. The plan was insane, and Landon said so immediately. You want to use her as bait, he said, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his mouth. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Marcus didn't flinch. It's the fastest way to end this. It's also a good way to get her killed. Not if we control every variable. We announce her return, stage a public appearance at the company headquarters, surround her with security so tight a mosquito couldn't get through. Voss will panic. When he does, he'll either run or make a move. Either way, we'll have him. Celeste stood by the kitchen window, arms crossed, staring out at the lake. She hadn't spoken since Marcus dropped the revelation about Damien. Celeste, Landon said, tell him this is crazy. She turned around and her expression was carved from stone. When's the earliest we can do it? No, Landon said flatly. Absolutely not. It's not your decision. The hell it isn't. You're living in my house, putting my daughter at risk. I get a vote. And I appreciate everything you've done, but this ends now. I'm not hiding anymore. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, the only sign of the fear underneath. Damien was my partner. I trusted him with everything. He stood beside me when I built this company from nothing, and now I find out he's been stealing from me, trying to kill me, threatening innocent people. She looked at Landon. He came after you and Chloe because of me. I won't let that continue. Chloe, who'd been quietly eating her cereal and pretending not to listen, suddenly spoke up. Who's Damien? Everyone turned to look at her. A bad person, Celeste said carefully. Someone who hurt people and needs to be stopped. Like a villain? Yeah, like a villain. Chloe considered this with the seriousness of a child processing adult problems. Are you going to fight him? I'm going to try. Will Daddy help? Celeste glanced at Landon and something unspoken passed between them. I hope so. Landon wanted to say no. Wanted to tell Marcus to take his plans and his security team and get the hell out of his house. Wanted to go back to the simple problems of broken sinks and overdue bills, but Chloe was watching him with those wide eyes, waiting to see if her father would do the right thing or the safe thing. And he'd already taught her that sometimes they weren't the same. Fine, Landon said, but I'm coming with you. Marcus started to object, but Celeste cut him off. Okay, she said. Okay? Marcus looked between them. Miss Laurent, that's not protocol. I don't care about protocol. If Landon wants to come, he comes. She turned to Landon. But Chloe stays here with protection, non-negotiable. Agreed. Marcus rubbed his temples like he was developing a migraine. You're both insane. Probably, Celeste said, but we're doing this anyway. The announcement went live that afternoon. Laurent Tech's PR team released a carefully worded statement confirming that Celeste Laurent had survived a serious car accident and was recovering well. She would be returning to the San Francisco headquarters in 3 days for a company-wide meeting to address recent challenges and outline the path forward. Within an hour, the story exploded across business news. Stock prices jumped. Social media flooded with reactions. And somewhere in San Francisco, Damien Voss was reading the news and realizing his perfect crime had just fallen apart. Marcus coordinated everything with military precision. Transportation, security routes, safe houses in the city, backup plans for the backup plans. He brought in additional agents, ran threat assessments, and transformed Landon's quiet lakeside house into a command center. Celeste spent the next 2 days preparing. She made calls to board members, reviewed financial documents Marcus's team had compiled, and practiced the speech she'd deliver at headquarters. At night, she sat with Chloe, helping with homework and reading bedtime stories in voices that got progressively better. Landon watched the transformation with something like awe. The scared woman he'd pulled from a burning car was disappearing, replaced by the CEO the world expected. Sharper, colder, more controlled. He wasn't sure which version was real anymore. On the second night, after Chloe had gone to bed, Landon found Celeste on the porch again. She wore one of his old sweatshirts over her expensive clothes, looking like a strange hybrid of both worlds she inhabited. Can't sleep? He asked, sitting beside her. Too much in my head. She pulled the sweatshirt tighter. I keep thinking about all the times Damien and I worked late, all the conversations we had about building something that mattered. He was my friend, Or I thought he was. People lie. I know, but it still hurts. Landon understood that better than she knew. When Sarah got sick, people I thought were friends disappeared. Couldn't handle the reality of someone dying slowly. They sent cards, made promises to visit, then just vanished. You learn pretty fast who actually gives a damn. How do you trust anyone after that? You don't, not completely, but you try anyway, because the alternative is being alone. Celeste looked at him. Is that what you think I am? Alone? I think you've been alone for a long time. Maybe by choice, maybe not. But yeah. She didn't deny it. What if I don't know how to be anything else? Then you learn. Same way you learned to make scrambled eggs without burning them. I burned them this morning. Okay, bad example, but you get the point. Celeste smiled faintly, then sobered. Landon, if something goes wrong in San Francisco, nothing's going wrong. But if it does, I need you to promise me something. She turned to face him fully. Chloe stays protected. Whatever happens to me, Marcus keeps her safe until this is completely over. Stop talking like you're going to die. I'm being realistic. No, you're being dramatic. We go in, you do your thing, Marcus catches Damien doing something stupid, and we all go home. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. Then we'll make it simple. Oh. Celeste studied his face, and Landon saw something shift in her expression. Gratitude, maybe? Or something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything, for saving my life, for letting me hide here, for not treating me like I'm made of glass. You're welcome, and for the record, you're definitely not made of glass. Maybe titanium, possibly something more annoying. She laughed, the sound surprising both of them. Annoying? You reorganized my kitchen cabinets. They were a mess. They were organized by how often I use things. Now I can't find anything. That's because you're disorganized. I'm efficient. You're a disaster. They were grinning at each other now, and the tension that had been coiled tight for days finally loosened. I'm going to miss this, Celeste said softly. Miss what? This. Normal arguments about cabinets, eating mediocre spaghetti, reading dinosaur books, feeling like a person instead of a corporation. Landon's chest tightened. You'll come back and visit. Chloe would riot if you didn't. Would you? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was brave enough to address. Yeah, Landon said finally. I would. Celeste smiled, and it was the real one again. Not the CEO mask, but something honest and fragile. Good, she said. They sat together until the cold drove them inside, neither quite ready to admit that in 3 days this strange interlude would be over, and they'd return to their separate lives like none of it had ever happened. The morning they left for San Francisco, Chloe cried. I don't want you to go, she said, clinging to Landon's neck while Marcus loaded bags into the SUV. It's just for 1 day, kiddo. I'll be back tomorrow. What if something bad happens? Landon pulled back to look at her. Nothing bad is going to happen. Miss Laurent just needs to go to work, and I'm going to make sure she gets there safely. Promise? That word again, heavy with the weight of every promise he'd ever broken. Every time he'd told Sarah she'd get better. Every time he'd said everything would be okay. But he looked at his daughter's tear-streaked face and said it anyway. I promise. Celeste knelt beside them, and Chloe immediately transferred her grip to hug them both. You have to come back too, Chloe told Celeste fiercely. You promised to teach me about business stuff. I will. And when I do, we'll have a proper lesson. Maybe I'll even let you sit in my office chair. The spinny one? The very spinny one. Chloe pulled back, slightly mollified. Okay, but you both have to be careful. We will, Celeste promised. Marcus cleared his throat. We need to move. Windows closing. Landon kissed Chloe's forehead and handed her off to the agent who'd be staying behind. The woman, stern-faced but kind-eyed, took Chloe's hand and led her back inside the house. Landon climbed into the SUV beside Celeste, and they pulled away from the lakeside house that had become a strange sanctuary for both of them. The drive to San Francisco took 6 hours. They traveled in a convoy, Three SUVs with tinted windows, taking back roads and changing routes twice to avoid predictability. Marcus rode in the lead vehicle, coordinating with his team through an earpiece, while Landon and Celeste sat in the middle car with two agents who barely spoke. Somewhere around the third hour, Celeste's hand found Landon's on the seat between them. Neither of them mentioned it. They just held on. San Francisco hit like a slap after the quiet of Blackwater Bay. The city sprawled across hills, all glass towers and traffic, and the kind of manic energy that made Landon's head hurt. Marcus had secured a penthouse suite in a hotel near Laurent Tech headquarters, 30 floors up with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. "This is where you're staying?" Landon asked, looking around at furniture that probably cost more than his truck. "Just for tonight," Celeste said. She stood at the window looking out at the city she'd once ruled. "Tomorrow, we end this." Marcus gathered them in the suite's living room for a final briefing. Maps, photos, security protocols, everything laid out with the precision of a military operation. "The meeting starts at 10 a.m., Marcus said. "We'll arrive at headquarters at 9:30, enter through the executive garage, take the private elevator to the top floor. Security will sweep every room, check every person entering the building. Miss Laurent will address the staff in the main conference room, which holds approximately 300 people. We'll have agents positioned throughout, plainclothes observers in the crowd, and snipers on adjacent buildings." "Snipers?" Landon repeated. "Precautionary. That's one hell of a precaution." Marcus ignored him. "Mr. Voss will be in attendance. He has to be, or his absence would raise suspicions. We expect him to act normally. Shake hands, play the loyal partner. But he'll be watching for an opening. Our job is to not give him one." "And if he doesn't make a move?" Celeste asked. "Then we move to Plan B. Federal agents will be standing by to arrest him on embezzlement charges the moment you give the signal. It's not attempted murder, but it'll get him off the streets while we build the rest of the case." Celeste nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Give the speech. Be visible. Let him see that you're not afraid." "Even though I am, especially because you are." Marcus looked at her with something almost like respect. "Fear makes you careful. Careful keeps you alive." After the briefing, the agents dispersed to their positions, leaving Landon and Celeste alone in the massive suite. "You should rest," Landon said. "Tomorrow's going to be long." "I can't rest. Every time I close my eyes, I see Damien's face and wonder how I missed it. All the signs must have been there, and I just—" She trailed off, frustrated. "You trusted someone. That's not a character flaw." "It is when it almost gets you killed." Landon moved to stand beside her at the window. The city glittered below, beautiful and indifferent. "After Sarah died, he said, I went through every conversation we ever had, looking for signs I should have seen. Times she seemed tired, headaches she dismissed, doctor's appointments she canceled. I tortured myself thinking if I'd just paid more attention, pushed harder, maybe we could have caught it earlier." "Did it help?" "No, because it wasn't my fault, and beating myself up didn't change anything. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and there's no one to blame but the universe for being cruel." Celeste leaned against him slightly, and Landon wrapped an arm around her shoulders without thinking about it. "When did you get so wise?" she asked. "I'm not wise. I'm just tired of watching people I care about hurt themselves over things they can't control." She looked up at him. "You care about me?" Landon realized what he'd said and felt his face heat. "I mean, yeah. We're friends, or something." "Or something," Celeste echoed. And there was something in her voice that made his pulse quicken. They stood like that for a long moment, the unspoken thing between them growing louder in the silence. Then Celeste's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She pulled away to check it, and her expression went cold. "What is it?" Landon asked. She turned the screen to show him. An email, sender unknown, with no subject line. Just 5 words in the body. "Tomorrow you die like her." Attached was a photo of Sarah in the hospital bed, taken days before she died. Landon's vision went white. "How did he get that?" His voice came out strangled. "How the hell did he get a picture of my wife?" Marcus was back in the room within seconds, summoned by the panic in Celeste's voice. He took the phone, studied the email, and his face went rigid. "Hospital records," Marcus said. "Voss must have hired someone to dig into your background after the accident. Found out about Sarah, accessed her files, took this photo from the medical database. That's illegal. That's the least illegal thing he's done." Landon wanted to put his fist through the window, through a wall, through Damien Voss's face. "He's trying to get in your head," Marcus said. "Make you emotional, make you careless. Don't let him." "Don't let him?" Landon's laugh was bitter. "He violated my wife's memory to threaten us. How am I supposed to— by remembering why we're doing this." Celeste's voice cut through his rage. "He wants you angry and reckless. If you give him that, he wins." Landon forced himself to breathe, to think past the red haze. "What does the message mean?" he asked. "Tomorrow you die like her. Sarah died from cancer. That's not—" He stopped. Understanding hit like ice water. "He's going to make it look like an accident," Landon said slowly, "or an illness, something that can't be traced back to him." "Oh." Marcus was already on his phone, barking orders to his team. "I want every food item tested, every ventilation system checked, every person entering that building tomorrow screened for chemical residue. If Voss is planning to poison her, we find it first." Celeste sank onto the couch, and Landon saw the mask finally crack. She looked terrified. "Maybe we should cancel," she said. "Postpone? Regroup? Find another way?" "No," Landon said. He sat beside her, taking her hands. "We don't postpone. We go in tomorrow, and we end this. Because if we don't, he'll keep coming. He'll keep threatening, and I'll be damned if I let him use my wife's memory as a weapon." Celeste searched his face. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Marcus finished his call and turned back to them. "Security's been tripled. We're treating this as a level 5 threat. Same protocols we'd use for a head of state. Nothing gets near you that we haven't personally verified." "Will that be enough?" Celeste asked. "It has to be." Sleep was impossible. Landon lay in the guest room of the suite, staring at the ceiling, while his brain replayed the photo of Sarah over and over. Someone had violated her privacy, used her suffering as a tool of intimidation, and there was nothing he could do about it except finish what they'd started. At 2 a.m., he gave up and walked to the living room. Celeste was already there, curled up on the couch with a laptop, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. "Couldn't sleep either?" Landon asked. She closed the laptop. "Too wired. I keep running through tomorrow in my head, looking for gaps in the plan." "Find any?" "About 100, when Landon sat on the opposite end of the couch. "You don't have to do this, you know. We could disappear, start over somewhere Damien would never find us." "Run away, you mean?" "Survive." Celeste shook her head. "I've been running my whole life. From my parents' expectations, from real relationships, from anything that might hurt me. It's made me successful and miserable in equal measure." She looked at him. "These past 2 weeks with you and Chloe, I felt more real than I have in a decade. I'm not running anymore. Even if it gets you killed?" Even then, Landon wanted to argue, to convince her that survival mattered more than pride. But he understood the need to face your demons instead of letting them chase you forever. "Okay," he said. "Then we do this together." "Together," Celeste agreed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights below. "Can I ask you something?" Celeste said eventually. "Sure." "When Sarah died, how did you know it was time to let go?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" When did you stop fighting and accept it?" Landon thought back to those final days in hospice. Sarah barely conscious, her body failing despite every medical intervention. The doctors gently suggesting it was time to say goodbye. "I didn't accept it," he said. "Not really. I just realized that holding on was hurting her more than letting go. She was ready to stop fighting, even if I wasn't ready to lose her. So I told her it was okay to rest." Celeste's eyes were wet. "What did she say?" "She asked me to take care of Chloe, to make sure she grew up knowing how much her mother loved her, to find happiness again instead of drowning in grief." His throat tightened. I'm still working on that last part. I think you're doing better than you realize. Yeah? Yeah, Chloe's lucky. And so was Sarah. But Landon looked at this woman who'd crashed into his life 2 weeks ago, literally, and realized something had shifted. She wasn't just the billionaire he'd saved anymore. She was Celeste, someone who read dinosaur books with enthusiasm, who burned eggs and reorganized cabinets, who was terrified but refused to show it, someone who mattered. For what it's worth, he said, I'm glad I pulled you out of that car, even with all the chaos it caused. Especially because of the chaos. It reminded me that life's still happening, even when it feels like it stopped 3 years ago. Celeste moved closer. Celeste moved, closing the distance between them on the couch. Landon, whatever she was going to say was interrupted by Marcus bursting through the door, his expression grim. We have a problem, he said. The problem was Damien Voss. He'd left San Francisco. Airport security footage shows him boarding a private jet 4 hours ago, Marcus said, pulling up images on his tablet. Filed a flight plan to Mexico City, but the plane changed course mid-flight. We lost track of it over the Pacific. He ran, Celeste said, her voice hollow. He knows we're on to him. Maybe. Or maybe he's repositioning for an attack we haven't anticipated. Oh, I'm sorry. Landon stood up, pacing. So what do we do? Cancel tomorrow? No, Celeste said. We go ahead as planned. If Damien's run, then he's admitted guilt. The federal agents can issue a warrant, freeze his accounts, put him on every watch list in the world. He'll spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. But he gets away, Landon said. For now. But he loses everything. His reputation, his money, his freedom. That's something. Marcus nodded slowly. It's not ideal, but Miss Laurent's right. We proceed tomorrow, announce his crimes, and let law enforcement handle the manhunt. Landon wanted to argue. Wanted to find Damien himself and make him pay for every threat, every violation, every moment of fear he'd caused. But revenge wasn't justice, and Chloe needed a father more than the world needed one more vigilante. Fine, he said. We do it your way. Morning came too fast. Landon put on the suit Marcus's team had provided. Tailored, expensive, nothing like his usual jeans and work boots. He felt like a fraud. Celeste emerged from her room in a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back, her expression all business. The transformation was complete. This was the CEO the world knew, not the woman who'd sat on his porch talking about loneliness. Ready? She asked. No, but let's go anyway. Come. The convoy formed outside the hotel. 3 SUVs, 8 agents, enough firepower to start a small war. Landon climbed into the middle vehicle beside Celeste, and they pulled into San Francisco traffic. The Laurent Tech headquarters was a glass tower in the financial district, 40 stories of steel and ambition. News crews had gathered outside, alerted to Celeste's return by the PR team. Cameras flashed as the SUVs pulled into the underground garage. Marcus was out first, scanning the area while his team formed a protective barrier around Celeste and Landon. They moved quickly to the private elevator, ascending to the top floor where the executive offices waited. The conference room was already filling, employees, board members, department heads. 300 people gathering to hear what their CEO would say after nearly dying in a car crash and disappearing for 2 weeks. Celeste stood at the window, looking down at the city she'd built an empire in. Last chance to back out, Landon said quietly. She turned to him, and the mask slipped for just a second. Underneath was fear, determination, and something that looked like goodbye. Thank you, she said, for everything. We're not done yet. I know, but just in case, don't. She smiled sadly. Okay, no goodbyes. Marcus appeared in the doorway. It's time. Celeste took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked into the conference room. Landon followed, his heart pounding, knowing that whatever happened in the next hour would change everything. The doors closed behind them with a heavy, final sound, and 300 people turned to watch as Celeste Laurent stepped up to the microphone to confront the man who'd tried to destroy her. Except Damien Voss wasn't there. Celeste scanned the room from the podium, her eyes moving across familiar faces. Executives she'd hired, board members she'd fought with, employees who'd built this company alongside her. But the one face she needed to see was conspicuously absent. Marcus stood against the back wall, his expression unreadable but his posture tense. He touched his earpiece, listening to something, then shook his head slightly at Celeste. No sign of Voss anywhere in the building. Celeste gripped the edges of the podium, her prepared speech suddenly feeling pointless. She'd come here to confront her betrayer, to expose him in front of everyone, to take back the power he'd stolen. Instead, she was staring at a room full of people who had no idea why their CEO had really disappeared for 2 weeks. Landon stood near the side entrance, watching her face carefully. He saw the moment she made her decision, saw her spine straighten and her expression harden. She was going to tell them everything anyway. 2 weeks ago, Celeste began, her voice cutting through the murmuring crowd. Someone tried to kill me. The room went dead silent. The car accident you read about in the news wasn't an accident. My vehicle was forced off the highway and over a cliff. I survived because a man I'd never met risked his life to pull me from the wreckage. She gestured toward Landon. That man is Landon Hayes, and he's the reason I'm standing here today instead of dead on the rocks below Blackwater Bay. 300 pairs of eyes turned to stare at Landon. He resisted the urge to disappear through the floor. What followed, Celeste continued, was an investigation that revealed something I never wanted to believe. Someone inside this company has been systematically embezzling millions of dollars, sabotaging my work, and when I got too close to discovering the truth, they decided murder was easier than consequences. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Board members exchanged shocked glances. Junior employees pulled out phones to record this, realized they probably shouldn't, and reluctantly put them away. That person, Celeste said, and her voice turned to ice, is Damien Voss. The gasps turned to outright chaos. People talking over each other, some shouting denials, others demanding proof. A woman in the front row started crying. Celeste raised her hand, and the room gradually quieted. I have evidence. Bank records, forged authorizations, digital forensics that trace every stolen dollar back to offshore accounts under his control. The FBI is currently building a case, and warrants for his arrest will be issued by the end of today. She paused. Damien is not here because he fled the country last night. He knew we were closing in, and he ran. Jonathan Chen, the CFO and the oldest member of the board, stood up slowly. He was 70, sharp as a blade, and had been with Laurent Tech since the beginning. Celeste, he said carefully, these are serious accusations. Damien has been your partner for 10 years. Are you absolutely certain? I'm certain, and I'll provide every piece of evidence to the board for independent verification. She met his eyes. I know this is a shock. It was for me too, but the truth doesn't change just because it's painful. Jonathan sat down heavily, looking like he'd aged a decade in 10 seconds. Marcus moved through the crowd toward the podium, his phone pressed to his ear. He whispered something to Celeste, and Landon saw her face go pale. Ladies and gentlemen, Celeste said, her voice slightly shaken, I need to pause for a moment. Please stay here. I'll return shortly with more information. She stepped away from the podium and walked quickly toward the side exit where Landon waited. Marcus followed, along with 2 agents. They moved into a smaller conference room and shut the door. What happened? Landon demanded. Marcus pulled up something on his tablet. Boss just posted a video. It went live 3 minutes ago on every major social media platform. He turned the screen so they could see. Damien Voss sat in what looked like a hotel room, expensive but anonymous. He was handsome in that polished way rich men often were. Perfect hair, designer stubble, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Hello, everyone, Damien said to the camera, his tone friendly and concerned. By now, Celeste has probably told you some disturbing things about me. I want you to know that none of it is true. Celeste made a sound like she'd been punched. The video continued. Celeste Laurent is a brilliant woman, but she's also deeply troubled. For months, I've watched her spiral into paranoia and instability. She sees conspiracies everywhere, trusts no one, and has made increasingly erratic decisions that have hurt this company and everyone in it. He's lying, Celeste whispered. The car accident was real, Damien said, his expression somber. But it wasn't attempted murder. It was reckless driving during a manic episode. Celeste has been struggling with her mental health for years, and I've tried to help her to protect her reputation while encouraging her to seek treatment. But she's refused. That son of a... Landon started, but Marcus held up a hand for silence. The allegations she's making against me, Damien continued, are part of a delusional pattern. She's convinced that people are trying to harm her, that I've betrayed her, that the company is in danger. None of this is based in reality. I have documentation from psychologists, testimony from colleagues who've witnessed her deterioration, and financial records that prove I've done nothing wrong. The video showed documents briefly, official-looking papers with signatures and letterheads that Landon couldn't read from the tablet screen. I'm heartbroken, Damien said, and he actually managed to look it. Celeste was like family to me, but I can't stand by while she destroys everything we built together. The board will have to make difficult decisions about her fitness to lead, and I support whatever they decide. I just hope she gets the help she needs. The video ended. Celeste stood frozen, her face drained of color. He's framing you, Landon said, making it look like you're crazy so nobody believes the truth. It's brilliant, Marcus said grimly. Vicious, but brilliant. Even with our evidence, the narrative is now about Celeste's mental state instead of his crimes. He's turned this into a he said, she said, where reasonable doubt works in his favor. So what do we do? Landon asked. Celeste finally moved. She walked to the window and stared out at the city, her reflection ghostly in the glass. We prove he's lying, she said quietly. How? She turned around, and Landon saw something dangerous in her eyes. By giving him exactly what he wants. Bullshit. The plan came together in 15 minutes. Celeste would return to the conference room and announce that she was stepping back from day-to-day operations, citing stress and the need to focus on her recovery. She'd position it as a voluntary decision made in the company's best interest. You're giving up? Landon said, incredulous. I'm baiting a trap. Damien wants control of the company. If I step aside willingly, he'll come back to claim it. He won't be able to resist. And when he does, then we have him in a room where the FBI can arrest him properly, with cameras rolling and witnesses everywhere. No running, no hiding, no more games. Marcus was already coordinating with federal agents. They can be here in 6 hours. We'll set up surveillance, prepare the arrest warrant, make sure everything is airtight. What if he doesn't come back? Landon asked. What if he stays in hiding and runs the company remotely? He won't, Celeste said with certainty. Damien's ego is too big. He needs to be seen winning, needs everyone to know he's the one in control. A video statement isn't enough. He'll want his victory lap. It was a gamble, and they all knew it. I don't like this, Landon said. Celeste touched his arm gently. I know, but it's the only way to end this cleanly. Otherwise, he keeps his freedom, keeps spreading lies, and keeps threatening anyone connected to me, including Chloe. The mention of his daughter's name decided it for Landon. Fine, but I'm staying close. I wouldn't have it any other way. They returned to the conference room, where 300 anxious employees waited. Celeste stepped back up to the podium, and the room quieted immediately. I'm sure many of you have seen Damien's video by now, she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions Landon knew was churning inside her. He's made serious claims about my mental health, and I want to address them directly. She paused, and in that pause, Landon saw her choose vulnerability over strength. The truth is, Celeste continued, the past year has been incredibly difficult. Building this company consumed my entire life, and I lost sight of everything else that mattered. The stress, the isolation, the constant pressure to be perfect. It took a toll I didn't want to admit. Some people in the crowd nodded sympathetically. Others looked skeptical. The accident was a wake-up call. It made me realize that I can't keep leading this company effectively while dealing with everything I'm dealing with. So I've made the decision to step back from daily operations, effective immediately. The room erupted. Jonathan Chen stood again. Celeste, you can't just abandon the company. I'm not abandoning it. I'm ensuring it survives. She looked around the room. I've asked the board to appoint an interim CEO while I take time to focus on my health and address the serious allegations that have been made. Once everything is resolved, we'll reassess. And who would serve as interim CEO? Jonathan asked. Celeste took a breath. Given his experience and knowledge of our operations, I believe Damien Voss is the logical choice. The chaos doubled, people shouting, some in support, others in outrage. Landon watched several board members pull out phones, already trying to reach Damien to discuss this sudden opportunity. Marcus stood against the wall, a slight smile on his face. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait for the rat to take the bait. Oseg. It took 4 hours. Celeste spent that time in her private office with Landon and Marcus, watching news coverage of her announcement spread across every business channel. The narrative was already forming. Troubled CEO steps down amid mental health concerns and internal fraud allegations. Stock prices wobbled but held steady, investors waiting to see what happened next. Landon paced the office, unable to sit still. He's going to know it's a trap. Maybe, Celeste said from behind her desk, or maybe his ego really is that big. Marcus's phone buzzed. He checked it, and something shifted in his expression. He just landed at SFO, Marcus said. Private jet from a holding pattern over international waters. He's been circling, waiting to see what you'd do. Told you, Celeste said. Within an hour, Damien Voss called for an emergency board meeting. Marcus's team had the conference room wired with enough surveillance equipment to make the NSA jealous. FBI agents in plain clothes mixed with Laurent Tech employees. Everything was ready. Landon stood with Celeste in her office as the board members gathered. Last chance to back out, he said. She smiled faintly. You keep saying that, and you keep ignoring me. It's one of my best qualities. Despite everything, Landon found himself smiling. You're impossible. Yes. I prefer determined. Marcus appeared in the doorway. He's in the building, walked right through the front door like he owns the place. He thinks he does, Celeste said. Let's show him otherwise. They walked together toward the conference room. Landon could hear Damien's voice through the door, smooth, confident, already talking about healing the company and restoring trust. Celeste paused with her hand on the door handle. Thank you, she said to Landon, for everything, no matter what happens in there. Nothing's going to happen except him getting arrested. From your mouth to the universe's ears. She opened the door. Damien Voss stood at the head of the conference table, surrounded by board members. He looked exactly like his video, polished, sympathetic, in control. When he saw Celeste, his expression shifted to concern that looked almost genuine. Celeste, he said warmly, I'm so glad you're here. Please sit. We were just discussing the transition. I'll stand, thanks. Damien's smile tightened slightly. Of course, however you're comfortable. He gestured to the board members. We've been reviewing the situation, and I want you to know that everyone supports your decision to step back. It takes courage to admit when you need help. Does it? Celeste said flatly. Absolutely. And I want you to know that the company will be in good hands. I've dedicated my life to Laurent Tech, just as you have. Together, we built something extraordinary. I won't let that legacy be destroyed by temporary challenges. Jonathan Chen cleared his throat. Damien, before we proceed with the appointment, there are serious financial irregularities that need to be addressed. Celeste has provided evidence of forgery and manipulation, Damien interrupted smoothly. I've seen the so-called evidence, and it's been manufactured by someone trying to deflect from Celeste's own mistakes. My legal team is prepared to demonstrate this in court if necessary. Then let's demonstrate it now, Celeste said. She pulled out her tablet and connected it to the room's display screen. Financial records appeared, transfers, account numbers, dates and times all clearly documented. These are real-time bank records, Celeste said. Pulled this morning with proper legal authorization. They show systematic theft over 8 months, totaling $47 million. The money was funneled through shell corporations to offshore accounts. And every single authorization bears your digital signature, Damien. Damien's smile never wavered. Digital signatures can be faked. You, of all people, should know that, given your background in technology. They can be, but these weren't. Celeste pulled up another screen. This is biometric authentication data from our security system. Every time you access the financial servers, your fingerprint, retinal scan, and voice pattern were recorded. The timestamps match exactly with the unauthorized transfers. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Damien's confidence flickered for just a second. Even biometric data can be spoofed by someone with the right skills, he said. Someone paranoid enough to believe everyone is against them might go to extraordinary lengths to create false evidence. True, Celeste agreed, which is why I have something even better. She played a video file. The screen showed security footage from inside Laurent Tech's server room. Damien appeared alone at 2 a.m. 3 months ago. He sat at a terminal, logged in with his credentials, and spent 40 minutes transferring money while periodically checking his phone. The timestamp was clear, the video quality was perfect, and there was absolutely no way to claim it had been faked. Damien's face went pale. You were supposed to be in Tokyo that week, Celeste said quietly. But you told the board you were sick, canceled the trip, and came here instead, to steal from the company we built together. This is, Damien started, then stopped. His lawyer facade was cracking, replaced by something colder. This is ridiculous. I want my attorney present before we continue this conversation. That's your right, said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. 2 FBI agents stood at the entrance, credentials already displayed. Damien Voss, the lead agent said, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder. The room exploded. Damien backed away from the table, his composure completely shattered. You can't do this. I have diplomatic immunity. You have the right to remain silent. The agent interrupted, approaching with handcuffs. Everything else we can discuss downtown. Damien's eyes found Celeste, and the hatred there was so pure it was almost physical. You bitch, he snarled. I made you. I turned your stupid AI project into $1 billion empire, and you were going to push me out. Everything I did was protecting what I built. What we built, Celeste corrected. And you destroyed it because you couldn't handle me being the face of success instead of you. You don't deserve any of this. You're just a... The agent snapped the handcuffs on, cutting off whatever venom Damien was about to spew. Attempted murder? Damien said, turning back to the agents. That's insane. I never tried to kill anyone. The man who ran Miss Laurent's vehicle off the highway is in custody, the second agent said. He's cooperating fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. According to his testimony, you hired him to make it look like an accident. He's lying. We also have phone records, financial payments, and text messages between you coordinating the details. It's over, Mr. Voss. They led him toward the door. Damien fought every step, still insisting it was a mistake, still trying to spin one more lie. As he passed Celeste, he stopped. You'll regret this, he said quietly. I'll destroy you from prison if I have to. Celeste looked him in the eyes. You already tried your best. I'm still here. The agents pulled him away. The door closed, and Celeste Laurent finally let herself collapse into a chair, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her shaking. The aftermath was chaos of a different kind. Board members scrambled to distance themselves from Damien, claiming they'd had suspicions all along. News crews descended on the building within minutes, somehow getting word of the arrest before the FBI had even loaded Damien into their vehicle. Marcus and his team worked to secure the floor and manage the crowd. Landon stayed close to Celeste, watching her field questions from board members and answer calls from attorneys. She'd snapped back into CEO mode instantly, already planning damage control and restructuring strategies. But he saw the tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking. After an hour, Marcus appeared and physically removed Celeste from the chaos, citing security concerns. He shepherded her and Landon into a private elevator that descended to the garage where their convoy waited. Where are we going? Celeste asked. Safe house. You need rest, and this building is about to be swarmed by media. I should stay, address the employees, talk to the press. Tomorrow, Marcus said firmly. Today, you survive. Tomorrow, you rebuild. Celeste looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She nodded and let Marcus guide her into the SUV. Landon climbed in beside her. and they pulled away from Laurentech headquarters as news helicopters circled overhead. The safe house turned out to be a waterfront condo in Sausalito, small but secure, with a view of the bay and enough distance from the city to breathe. Marcus's team swept it quickly, then gave Celeste and Landon space. They stood on the balcony, watching boats drift across the water as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. "It's really over," Celeste said quietly. "Yeah, I keep waiting to feel relieved, but I just feel empty." Landon understood that. "You spent months fighting, and now there's nothing left to fight. It takes time to adjust." "How long did it take you? After Sarah?" "I'll let you know when it happens." She looked at him, and something in her expression made his chest tight. "I meant what I said before," Celeste said. "Thank you. For everything. You didn't have to help me. You could have walked away a dozen times. So could you. That's different. I dragged you into this. And you kept Chloe safe. We're even." Celeste smiled faintly. "We're definitely not even, but I appreciate you saying it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Celeste spoke again, her voice hesitant. "What happens now?" "You go back to running your company. I go back to Blackwater Bay. Life returns to normal." "Normal," Celeste repeated, like the word tasted strange. "I'm not sure I remember what that is." "Me neither, but we'll figure it out. Will we?" She turned to face him fully. "Landon, these past 2 weeks have been the most terrifying and the most real time I've had in years. Going back to my life in San Francisco, alone in that penthouse, pretending I'm fine while the world watches every move I make." She trailed off. "I don't think I can do it." "Then don't. Change things. Build a different life." "Doing what?" "I don't know. That's the point. You get to decide instead of letting fear decide for you." Celeste looked out at the water again. "When I was in that hospital bed, I told myself that if I survived this, I'd stop hiding. Stop pretending I don't need anyone. Stop sacrificing everything human for the sake of success." She took a shaky breath. "But it's terrifying. I've spent so long building walls that I don't know how to let people in." Landon thought about Sarah, about the years of grief he'd wrapped around himself like armor, about how Celeste and her chaos had somehow cracked that armor enough to let light back in. "Start small," he said. "Let one person in. See what happens. And if it falls apart, then at least you tried. That's more than most people can say." Celeste looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe, or fear. Probably both. "Would you?" She started, then stopped. "Never mind. Forget it." "Would I what?" "Would you consider staying in San Francisco for a few days? You and Chloe. I know you have work, and she has school, but maybe just for the weekend. I could show you the city properly, without assassins and FBI agents and—" "Yes," Landon interrupted. Celeste blinked. "Yes?" "Yeah, Chloe would love it. She's been asking when she gets to visit the spinny chair you promised her." "You're sure? I don't want to impose." "Celeste, stop overthinking it. We'll visit. We'll have a normal weekend, and then we'll see what happens next." The relief on her face was almost painful to watch. "Okay," she said. "Okay, good. That's good, no?" They stood together on the balcony as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the city behind them, Damien Voss was being processed into federal custody. Somewhere in Blackwater Bay, Chloe was probably driving Marcus's protective detail crazy with dinosaur facts. And here, on this balcony between two lives, Landon Hayes and Celeste Laurent tried to figure out what came after survival. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. And it definitely wasn't the ending either of them had expected. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like a beginning. They returned to Blackwater Bay the next day. The drive was quieter than the trip up, both of them processing everything that had happened. Marcus rode in a separate vehicle, already coordinating the security team's withdrawal from Landon's house now that the immediate threat had passed. When they pulled into the driveway, Chloe burst out of the front door like she'd been launched from a cannon. "Daddy!" Say. Landon barely got out of the SUV before she tackled him, arms wrapped tight around his waist. "Hey, kiddo?" he said, hugging her back. Did you behave for the security team? Mostly. I taught them about Triceratops. I'm sure they loved that. Chloe pulled back and immediately turned to Celeste. Did you catch the bad guy? We did, Celeste said, kneeling down to Chloe's level. He's going to jail for a very long time. Good. Bad guys should go to jail. Chloe paused. Are you leaving now? The question held weight beyond its simple words. Celeste glanced at Landon, who nodded encouragingly. Not right away, Celeste said. I thought maybe I could stay a few more days, if that's okay with you and your dad. Chloe's face lit up. Really? Really. And then maybe next weekend. You two could come visit me in San Francisco. I have that spinny chair to show you. Can we, Daddy? Please? Landon pretended to think about it. I guess we could make that work. Chloe cheered and grabbed Celeste's hand, pulling her toward the house, while chattering about all the things they needed to do during the visit. Marcus approached Landon as they walked inside. My team will finish packing up tonight, Marcus said. By tomorrow morning, it'll be like we were never here. Except for the safe room in my basement, which you're welcome to keep. Consider it a thank you gift from Miss Laurent. Landon looked at the security chief. She's going to be okay, right? Going back to that world alone? Marcus smiled slightly. I don't think she'll be alone, not anymore. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're a good man, Hayes, and she needs good people in her life more than she needs board members and investors. Marcus extended his hand. Take care of her. Easy. I'm pretty sure she can take care of herself. True, but everyone needs backup, even billionaire CEOs. They shook hands and Marcus headed off to coordinate his team. Landon walked inside to find Celeste and Chloe already setting up a board game at the kitchen table. Celeste looked completely out of place in her expensive clothes surrounded by mismatched furniture and a leaking sink, but somehow she also looked more at home than she had in any penthouse. Daddy, we're playing Monopoly, Chloe announced. Miss Celeste says she's good at business, so I'm going to beat her extra hard. That's the spirit, Landon said, sitting down to join them. Celeste caught his eye and smiled, and in that smile was everything they hadn't said yet. All the questions about what came next, all the uncertainty about how a billionaire CEO and a construction worker could possibly make any kind of relationship work, all the fear and hope tangled together. But for now, they had this moment. This game of Monopoly with an 8-year-old who was absolutely going to bankrupt both of them. And somehow, that was enough. The game lasted 2 hours. Chloe won by a landslide, having somehow accumulated both Boardwalk and Park Place while Landon and Celeste argued about the proper interpretation of the free parking rule. After Chloe went to bed, making both of them promise again that they'd visit San Francisco, Landon and Celeste found themselves back on the porch, watching stars reflect off the lake. She's amazing, Celeste said. You've done an incredible job raising her. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's called being a parent, or so I've been told. Landon glanced at her. You never wanted kids. I never let myself want them. Too busy building an empire, too afraid of failing at something that actually mattered. She paused. But spending time with Chloe, it makes me wonder what I've been missing. It's not too late, to have all that. Maybe. Celeste looked at him. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you pulled me from that car, did you ever imagine it would lead to all this? Landon thought back to that stormy night, the split-second decision to climb down the cliff, the weight of an unconscious stranger on his shoulder as flames chased them both. No, he said honestly. I just saw someone who needed help. And now? Now I see someone who's brave enough to face her demons, kind enough to read dinosaur books with enthusiasm, and stubborn enough to reorganize my kitchen despite being told not to. Celeste laughed. Those cabinets were a disaster. They were perfectly functional. They were chaos. Same thing. They grinned at each other, and the comfortable familiarity of the argument felt like something worth keeping. Landon, Celeste said quietly, I know we haven't talked about what happens after this weekend, after San Francisco. I know my life is complicated and public, and probably the last thing you need after everything you've been through. Celeste, but I need you to know that these 2 weeks have changed me. You and Chloe have shown me what I've been missing by keeping everyone at arm's length. And I don't want to go back to that life. Not completely. Landon took her hand. So don't. It's not that simple. It is actually. You keep making time for this. For us. We figure it out as we go. Nobody expects perfect. We just try. You make it sound easy. I make it sound possible. There's a difference. Celeste squeezed his hand. What if I mess this up? I've never been good at relationships. Welcome to the club. I've been a widower for 3 years and haven't even tried to date because I was convinced I'd already used up my chance at happiness. He looked at her. But then you crashed into my life, literally, and reminded me that life keeps happening whether we're ready or not. That's either very profound or very depressing. Can't it be both? She smiled, and this time it was the real one. The one that made her look younger and less guarded and absolutely beautiful. Thank you, she said, for giving me a chance to be more than just my company. Thank you for giving me a reason to start living again instead of just surviving. They sat together under the stars, two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to try building something new. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be easy. And there were still 100 complications to figure out. But sitting there with her hand in his, watching the lake reflect moonlight like scattered diamonds, Landon thought that maybe, just maybe, they'd found something worth fighting for. Something that looked a lot like hope. 6 months later, Landon stood in his driveway holding a paint roller and seriously questioning his life choices. You're doing it wrong, Chloe called from the porch, where she sat with a juice box supervising his attempt to repaint the house's shutters. I'm doing it exactly right, Landon called back. Miss Celeste says you should use long, even strokes. Miss Celeste hasn't painted anything in her life. She painted with me last weekend. She's really good. Landon muttered something under his breath about billionaires and their opinions on home improvement, then went back to work. The shutters had needed repainting for 2 years, but he'd finally run out of excuses, especially since Celeste had casually mentioned during her last visit that the peeling paint made the house look charmingly rustic, which was rich person code for kind of a disaster. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He set down the roller and checked it. A text from Celeste. Flight lands at 3. Chloe promised to show me her science project. Should I be worried? Landon smiled and typed back. It involves baking soda and vinegar. Be very worried. 3 dots appeared. Then, I'll wear old clothes. The past 6 months had been an exercise in figuring out how to make an impossible relationship work. Celeste came to Blackwater Bay every other weekend, staying in Landon's guest room and pretending she didn't notice when the hot water ran out mid-shower. Landon and Chloe visited San Francisco on alternate weekends, staying in Celeste's penthouse and pretending they belonged in a world of doormen and rooftop gardens. It shouldn't have worked. On paper, it was ridiculous. A construction worker dating a tech billionaire, their lives separated by more than just geography. But somehow, in the spaces between their two worlds, they'd found something real. Not perfect. Real. Which meant fights about stupid things like cabinet organization and whether Chloe should attend private school in San Francisco, a suggestion Celeste made once and immediately regretted when Landon spent 20 minutes explaining why uprooting his daughter from her friends was insane. It meant Celeste missing Chloe's dance recital because of an emergency board meeting, then showing up at midnight with apology donuts and genuine tears in her eyes. It meant Landon trying and failing to feel comfortable at charity galas where his construction-roughened hands felt out of place holding champagne glasses. But it also meant Celeste teaching Chloe about coding and business strategy while they baked cookies. It meant Landon fixing things around Celeste's penthouse that her expensive maintenance team had overlooked, finding satisfaction in problems he could solve with his hands. It meant the 3 of them falling into a rhythm that felt less like forcing puzzle pieces together and more like discovering they'd been part of the same picture all along. Chloe had asked, about 3 months in, if Celeste was going to be her new mom. Landon had frozen, not sure how to answer, but Celeste had knelt down and said something that he'd never forgotten. I could never replace your mom, Chloe. She was special and irreplaceable, and she loved you more than anything in the world. But if you'd let me, I'd like to be someone who loves you too, not instead of her. alongside her memory. Chloe had thought about it with the seriousness of a child processing big emotions, then nodded. Okay, but you have to learn more about dinosaurs. Deal. Now, 6 months later, Celeste could name every major dinosaur period and at least 15 species. She'd learned to cook, badly, but with enthusiasm. She'd started wearing jeans on weekends and laughing at Landon's terrible jokes and acting like a person instead of a corporation. And Landon had learned to let someone in again, to risk caring about someone who might leave, might get hurt, might disappear like Sarah had. It terrified him every single day. But Celeste was worth the fear. "Daddy, you missed a spot," Chloe announced. Landon looked at the shutters. "Where?" "Everywhere. It's all spotty." "Thank you, art critic." "You're welcome." He was laughing when the car pulled up, not one of Marcus's black SUVs, but Celeste's personal car, a Tesla she drove herself when she wasn't being CEO. She climbed out wearing jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking nothing like the polished businesswoman on magazine covers. Looking like home. Chloe launched herself at Celeste before she'd even closed the car door. "You're early." "I couldn't wait," Celeste said, hugging her back. "I heard there's a science project that might explode." "It's not going to explode, probably." "That's reassuring." Celeste looked over Chloe's head at Landon, and the smile she gave him was private and warm and entirely his. "Hey," she said. "Hey yourself, how was the flight?" "Long, but worth it." She surveyed his paint job. "The shutters look good." "Liar." "Okay, they look terrible, but you tried, and that's what counts." "I hate you." "No, you don't." She was right, of course. He definitely didn't hate her. The opposite, actually. But they hadn't said those words yet. Both of them were still too scared, still testing the waters of this thing between them, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Landon wondered when they'd stop waiting and just jump. Well, the science project did not explode, but it did overflow spectacularly, covering Celeste's shirt in a foam of vinegar and baking soda that Chloe insisted was part of the demonstration. Later, after Chloe had gone to bed and Landon had finished cleaning the kitchen, he found Celeste on the porch. She changed into one of his old sweatshirts, stolen months ago and never returned, and stood at the railing watching the lake. "Penny for your thoughts," Landon said, joining her. "Inflation's been rough. That'll cost you at least $1. Highway robbery. Welcome to capitalism." He smiled but noticed the tension in her shoulders. "Seriously, what's wrong?" Celeste took a breath. "The board wants me to relocate the company headquarters to New York. They think it'll help with expansion, give us better access to East Coast markets. It makes financial sense." Landon's stomach dropped. When would this happen? 6 months, maybe sooner if we can find the right building. She turned to look at him. "I told them no." "Celeste, I know what you're going to say, that it's a good opportunity, that I shouldn't sacrifice business for personal reasons, that we can make long-distance work. Actually, I was going to say that you should do what's right for your company." She blinked, surprised. "You want me to move to New York?" But I want you to make the choice that doesn't leave you with regrets." Landon leaned against the railing beside her. "If moving the company is the right business decision, then do it. Don't let fear of losing this hold you back. And what about us? We figure it out, same way we've been figuring everything else out." Celeste looked at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. "You're serious?" "Yeah. Landon, New York is 3,000 miles away. We'd see each other maybe once a month. Chloe would grow up with me as the occasional visitor instead of—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Instead of what?" Landon asked gently. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. "Instead of part of her life, part of your lives. I know we haven't defined what this is, and maybe that's my fault for being too scared to ask, but these past 6 months have been the happiest I've had in years. The thought of losing that, of losing you two—" "You're not losing us." "How can you say that? If I move, then we move too." The words hung in the air between them. Celeste stared at him. "What?" "Oh, Landon hadn't planned to say it. Hadn't even consciously decided it until the words left his mouth. But now that they were out there, he realized he meant them. New York has construction jobs, he said, and schools for Chloe, and probably apartments we can actually afford if we look in the right neighborhoods. It wouldn't be easy, and Chloe would hate leaving her friends, but kids are resilient. She'd adapt. You'd uproot your entire life for me? I'd uproot my life for a chance at something real, something that matters. He took her hands. Celeste, I spent 3 years living in the past, convinced my chance at happiness died with Sarah. Then you crashed into my life and reminded me that the future's still happening, whether I'm ready or not. So yeah, if the future involves New York, then we'll figure out New York. Celeste was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering a bet. What if it doesn't work? What if we get there and realize we made a mistake? Then we made a mistake together. That's still better than being safe and alone. She laughed through her tears. When did you become an optimist? About 5 minutes ago. I'm terrified, if that helps. It does, actually, mate. They stood there holding hands while Celeste cried and laughed and tried to process what he was offering. Landon waited, letting her work through it, knowing this was the moment that would define everything that came after. Finally, she took a shaky breath. I told the board no, she said again. Not because I'm afraid of the decision, but because I realized something these past 6 months. I built a $4 billion company, and I was miserable. Then I found a life with you and Chloe in this tiny town with a leaking sink and terrible hot water, and I've never been happier. The board can expand without relocating headquarters. We can open a New York office without me living there, because success means nothing if I'm succeeding alone. Landon's chest tightened. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She stepped closer. I love you, Landon. I love Chloe. I love the life we're building together. Even when it's messy and complicated and nothing like what I planned, I don't want to sacrifice that for corporate expansion. There they were, the words they'd both been too scared to say. I love you too, Landon said, and it felt like finally exhaling after holding his breath for 3 years. And I promise I'll fix the hot water situation. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. My previous offer still stands. If you change your mind about New York, I won't. This is where I want to be, with you, with Chloe, building something that actually matters. Landon kissed her, and it tasted like tears and hope, and the beginning of something neither of them had expected but both of them needed. When they finally pulled apart, Celeste was smiling through her tears. So what now? She asked. Now we figure out the next step, together. I like the sound of that. They stood together on the porch, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new. It wouldn't be perfect. It would be messy and complicated and full of challenges neither of them could predict, but it would be real. And real was worth fighting for. 8. 3 months later, Celeste made an announcement that shocked the business world. She was stepping down as CEO of Laurent Tech, not because of scandal or pressure, but because she'd realized that running a company she'd built out of fear and ambition wasn't the same as building a life she actually wanted to live. She remained on the board, retained her shares, and continued to guide the company's direction. But the daily operations, the endless meetings, the pressure to be perfect, she handed all of it to a CEO she trusted and walked away from the empire she'd spent a decade building. The media called it a breakdown. Industry analysts predicted Laurent Tech would collapse without her at the helm. Stock prices dropped, then recovered, then stabilized as the new CEO proved competent and capable. And Celeste didn't care about any of it. She bought a house in Blackwater Bay. Not a mansion, but a comfortable home on the lake, with enough room for an office where she could consult and invest and build things that mattered to her, instead of things that impressed shareholders. She learned to cook without burning things, helped Chloe with homework, and discovered that being a person was infinitely more satisfying than being a brand. Landon proposed on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic or planned. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Chloe asleep inside after a long day of school and dance practice. And he just turned to her and said, "Marry me." Celeste had looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "What?" "Marry me. I don't have a ring yet, and this isn't romantic at all, but I don't want to wait for the perfect moment. I just want to spend the rest of my life with you. That's possibly the worst proposal in history. Is that a no, sir? That's a yes, you idiot. They'd laughed and cried and kissed while the sun painted the sky in colors that looked like a promise. The wedding happened 6 months later, small and private on the beach, where Landon had first pulled Celeste from the burning wreckage. Only close friends, a few loyal employees, and Chloe, who insisted on walking Celeste down the aisle because someone has to make sure she doesn't run away. Celeste wore a simple dress instead of the designer gown her stylist had suggested. Landon wore a suit that actually fit for once, and Chloe wore a dinosaur necklace that Celeste had given her, because some things were more important than matching the wedding aesthetic. Standing on that beach with the ocean crashing behind them and Chloe beaming between them, Landon thought about the night everything changed. The storm, the crash, the split-second decision to climb down the cliff instead of driving away. He thought about Sarah and the promise he'd made to take care of Chloe, to find happiness again instead of drowning in grief. He'd kept that promise, even when it meant letting someone new into their lives, even when it terrified him. And he thought about Celeste, who'd spent years building walls to protect herself, who'd believed money and power were safer than vulnerability, who'd almost died before learning that the most dangerous thing you can do is face life alone. I do, Celeste said when the officiant asked. I do, Landon echoed. And Chloe, not waiting for permission, shouted, I do too! Which made everyone laugh and cry at the same time. Bank. A year after the wedding, Landon found himself in a situation he never could have predicted. He was sitting in a conference room at Laurent Tech's Blackwater Bay's satellite office, an office Celeste had opened specifically so she could work locally while still contributing to the company she'd built. She was presenting a new initiative to the board via video call, and Landon was there for moral support. Or so he thought. And finally, Celeste said, wrapping up her presentation, I want to introduce our newest board member, someone who's taught me more about leadership and integrity in 2 years than I learned in a decade of business school. Landon Hayes. Landon's head snapped up. What? Bob J? Landon's what? The board members on the screen looked equally surprised. Celeste, Jonathan Chen said carefully, Landon has no business experience. He has something better. He understands what matters. He makes decisions based on people instead of profit margins. And he's not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong, which is a quality this board desperately needs. She looked at Landon. If you're interested. Landon wanted to say no, wanted to explain that he was a construction worker, not a corporate strategist, that he had no idea how to serve on a board of directors. But he thought about Celeste stepping away from fear to build a real life, about Chloe learning that bravery meant trying even when you weren't sure you'd succeed, about Sarah's voice in his memory, telling him to find happiness instead of hiding in the past. Okay, he said. I'm interested. The board spent the next hour asking him questions about his perspective on ethics, company culture, employee treatment. Landon answered honestly, probably not what they wanted to hear, definitely not polished or corporate, but when the vote happened, he was approved unanimously. Later, driving home with Celeste beside him and Chloe in the back seat, he asked, Did you plan that? Maybe. You could have warned me. You would have overthought it and said no. You're right, I definitely would have. Celeste smiled. See, I know you. Kind of terrifying, honestly. Get used to it. We're married now. I know all your secrets. From the back seat, Chloe piped up. Does this mean we're rich? No, Landon and Celeste said in unison. Aw, man. They drove home through Blackwater Bay as the sun set over the ocean, past the cliffs where everything had started, past the hospital where Celeste had woken up to a second chance, past the small houses and quiet streets that had become home to all of them. The house they pulled up to was bigger now. They'd bought it outright and renovated, fixing the sink and the hot water and the endless list of things that needed attention. But they'd kept its character, kept the porch where they'd spent countless nights talking, kept the lake view that had witnessed their transformation from strangers to family. Inside, Chloe immediately disappeared to her room to video call her friends. Landon and Celeste stood in the kitchen, organized now, though they still argued about the cabinet arrangement, and looked at each other. Board member Celeste said, How does it feel? terrifying, exciting, probably a mistake. Those are my three favorite things. Yeshi waporaya saumaji mom. Landon pulled her close. I never thought my life would look like this. After Sarah died, I was so sure that happiness was over for me, that I'd just exist, raising Chloe and going through the motions until time ran out. And now? Now I'm married to a woman who reorganizes my kitchen and puts me on corporate boards without warning. Now I have a daughter who's learning that family can grow instead of just shrink. Now I wake up every morning grateful instead of just surviving. He kissed her forehead. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Celeste's eyes filled with tears, happy ones this time. We saved each other. Yeah, we did. They stood in their kitchen, holding each other, while Chloe's laughter echoed from upstairs, and the lake sparkled through the windows. Two broken people who'd found each other in the worst moment and built something beautiful from the wreckage. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been smooth, and it definitely hadn't been perfect, but it was real, and real was everything. 2 years later, Landon stood at the edge of the same cliffs where he'd climbed down during the storm. A memorial had been placed here, not for the accident, but as a reminder. A plaque that read, "Sometimes the most dangerous thing we can do is walk away from someone who needs help. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone help us." Celeste had insisted on it after learning that 3 people had died on this stretch of highway in accidents where passing drivers hadn't stopped. She'd wanted something that would make people think twice before choosing safety over compassion. Now, standing here with Celeste beside him and Chloe running ahead to look at the ocean, Landon thought about how one decision had changed everything. If he'd driven past that night, if he'd chosen the safe option, protecting himself and Chloe instead of risking everything for a stranger, Celeste would be dead. That much was certain, but he also would have remained trapped in grief, convinced that his one chance at happiness had died with Sarah. Chloe would have grown up watching her father go through the motions instead of actually living. And somewhere in a San Francisco penthouse, a brilliant woman would have continued building walls around her heart, certain that success was safer than vulnerability. That power was more reliable than love. One decision, one moment of choosing someone else over safety, and 3 lives completely transformed. "What are you thinking about?" Celeste asked, slipping her hand into his. "How lucky I am that your car crashed." She laughed. "That's possibly the most morbid romantic thing you've ever said." "I'm serious. If you hadn't crashed, if I hadn't stopped, if any of 100 things had gone differently." "But they didn't. We're here together." "Yeah, we are." Chloe ran back to them, windswept and grinning. "Can we come back here for my birthday? I want to show my friends where you and Miss Celeste met." "Miss Celeste is your stepmom now," Landon reminded her. "You can just call her Celeste." "I know, but Miss Celeste sounds more official." Celeste laughed and ruffled Chloe's hair. "Call me whatever you want, kiddo. And yes, we can come back for your birthday." They walked back to the car together, a family built from tragedy and chance, and the decision to choose connection over safety. On the drive home, with Chloe chattering in the back seat about birthday plans and Celeste's hand warm in his, Landon thought about the question people always asked. Do you believe everything happens for a reason? He didn't know. Maybe some things were just random chaos. Maybe Sarah's cancer was just cells multiplying wrong. Maybe the storm that night was just weather. Maybe Damien's betrayal was just greed and ego colliding. But he knew this. When chaos happened, you got to choose how to respond. You could hide from it, protect yourself, build walls high enough that nothing could hurt you. Or you could climb down into the darkness and pull someone out, knowing it might destroy you, trusting that some things were worth the risk. For years, Landon had believed his story ended with loss, that loving someone meant eventually losing them, that opening his heart was just inviting more pain. But Celeste had taught him something different. That loss was part of life, but so was finding. That grief was the price of love, but love was still worth paying for. That the most powerful thing in the world wasn't avoiding pain, it was choosing to stay open to joy despite knowing pain would eventually come. Sarah had asked him to find happiness again, to live instead of just survive. He'd kept that promise, not by forgetting her or replacing her, but by honoring her memory through the choice to keep loving, keep trying, keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. And it was. Every day with Celeste and Chloe, building a life that wasn't perfect but was theirs, was a promise kept. Every morning he woke up grateful instead of just going through motions. Every moment of laughter, every argument about kitchen cabinets, every night on the porch watching the stars, all of it was a reminder that life continued, that joy was still possible, that love didn't have a limit on how many times you could find it. The most dangerous thing you can do is pull someone out of the darkness. But the most beautiful thing is discovering they can pull you out too. In the end, nobody saves anybody alone. We save each other. We choose each other. We build something bigger than ourselves from the broken pieces we bring. And that, Landon had learned, was the whole point. Not perfection, not safety, not control. Just the willingness to stay when life gets hard. To choose love when fear is easier. To believe that the person next to you is worth whatever storms come next. 3 years ago, Landon Hayes was a man drowning in grief, convinced his chance at happiness had died in a hospital room. Now he was a husband, a father, a board member of a tech company, and someone who'd learned that life's greatest gifts often arrive disguised as disasters. He'd climbed down a cliff in a storm to save a stranger, and in saving her, he'd saved himself. That was the thing about choosing compassion over safety, about risking everything for someone who needs help. Sometimes the person you save ends up being exactly the person you needed to find. And sometimes the most dangerous decision you make turns out to be the one that saves you both.